Okay, so I am being joined today by Steph Garner. Welcome.
Thank you.
The topic of conversation today is, I feel a bit of a sort of an age-old debate that we've called agency versus client side. I was trying to think of another word instead of versus, because not a competition, obviously, but I couldn't think of one. So it's still agency versus client side. Do you want to start us off, Steph, by giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself and a bit of an overview of your career history to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off my career in Wellington in beautiful New Zealand. Straight out of university, I went into an agency role in a business that really covered the wide gamut of everything marketing. So it had PR, it had market research, it had marketing, communications, government relations, advertising, events. It really covered off everything. And so I was really lucky to get a role in there straight out of university as a grad, and a very green grad as well. And they actually had a program where they often hired every year they would hire in new people without experience, and really invested in training them up. And I thought that was just such a great opportunity that I couldn't say no to. Thinking about the start of the career when I came out of university, and you get this marketing degree and it's all training, and it's all quite marketer, thinking, all the training, all of the real world practice that we had was in client side. And what I found quite charming about the idea of going agency side was really just the breadth of experience I could get. And particularly an agency like I went into was all those different elements, as I mentioned. So I quickly learned that PR selling, media selling just wasn't my jam, and maybe I could focus on some of the other areas of it. And that really sparked me off down into quite a long career in agency side. So that was really great as a first role. And to be honest, I worked for some really great leaders who were super intelligent, had amazing experience, and really invested in us as juniors, and really helped us progress through those early junior ranks, and gave us some great experience. And honestly, it's one of the jobs that I'm always trying to best. I'm thinking I'm always kind of chasing that first job, which was so great for all the people that we worked with, the brands we worked with, and the jobs that we got. So what a great grounding and the professionalism that you need to be working agency side, as well as the the marketing nous that we gained. So
yeah, you mentioned that.
Oh, you're on mute.
There I am. I'm back. You mentioned that the focus of studies was very much around client side. How did you come to find that first role? Did they actually come to the universities, and were they specifically looking for grads? Is that how it worked?
They didn't, but it was really through networks. So somebody I knew somebody I knew, and it came about that way. So it was really following an opportunity, and it also required a move. So I had done my university years in Christchurch. So they did quite a solid interview process at the start, and they had several different grads. But yeah, it was really following an opportunity through networks, that one.
And you mentioned that you sort of felt like you were often sort of chasing that feeling of the first job, but you sort of grew your career agency side from there, and kind of moved across a couple of roles.
Absolutely, yeah. So I from that role, actually, I thought I needed to spread my wings and head off overseas, as we all do, particularly for Kiwis in that small country. So
and the English too,
So I went off to the UK. So both personally wanting to travel around a bit, and also professionally really wanting to get that international experience. So I went over there and worked through a couple of different agencies there, who really were working with some big brands. So Tesco, Ford of Europe, Bacardi International were three of the big ones that I worked on over there in a couple of different agencies. And what was interesting about the UK and the agencies I worked there, one in particular that I spent the vast majority of my time over there, was that it was actually a very digital and content focused agency, which is a bit different to what I had done before. And I really liked that, jumping into different areas of marketing again, as I said before. And interestingly, I was there and getting started in this agency when two things were happening. First, the GFC, or the credit crunch, as we knew it over in
I
the
was
UK.
there during that time. It was a crazy, crazy time, wasn't it?
Wild time. It was a wild time. And also the other thing was within marketing, was content marketing was really starting to get going. So it was at that time where I was working with Tesco, and we were putting together a really, one of the biggest content marketing plays that had been at that level of business, at that level of brand before. And it was actually all around, it was called Greener Living, and it was all to do around more environmentally aware. And that's when the GFC hit. So it was there that I learned to, this golden P word, pivot. We had to pivot our entire strategy from, doing the things and the retailer context, buying things that were to save electricity, all those kinds of things to impact the environment in a good way. And then we had to really switch it up, because all of a sudden everybody was worried about money and not the environment. And isn't it interesting? Not that many things have changed all these years.
I know.
We're, up against very similar challenges. But yeah, so I got it was really interesting that I landed in that role just when content marketing was going, and it was all around, the blog that we had, the channels through which we can, all the social channels that were really just starting to ramp up then as well, and using all of those to connect with customers and to connect as a brand with the right customers and persuade them to buy and be loyal. So it was really fascinating, that stretch of time.
Yeah, great brand to be working on as well. And I think they've lost a little bit of market share in recent years, but certainly at that time, Tesco were were the poster child of how to do it. They had done an amazing job, and their agencies supporting them to really differentiate themselves from the pack, which in the UK, that supermarket space is got crowded, but there's sort of 4 or 5 really big players, as opposed to probably the 2, maybe 3 now with Aldi here. Apart from sort of the size of brands, which I think is one of the things that international experience definitely gives you, was there anything else that sort of you noticed that was different about working in the UK, or experience that you feel that it gave you?
I really, the biggest thing is what you've just mentioned, is the scale. And also what my experience over there gave me was not just scale in terms of volume, of customers to connect with and volume of sales, but the scale of language and rollout and all that kind of thing. I managed a project that had to be rolled out and translated against 13 different languages, and all of the interesting digital side problems that come with that, and complexities that come with that. So, and the other thing as well, is one of my first forays into really huge corporate working environments. So the client partners I had in there, all of the different teams and all of the different structures make up that kind of ladder up into what makes Tesco tick across all of their different campuses, and all of the siloed way in which they worked was a real learning for me, particularly having only worked agency side before, and much smaller. You can work in big agencies, but it's quite a cohesive unit, really, to go into some of these large corporates. So that gave me the exposure into that, which helped me really understand, how it all ticked on the other side of the fence.
Yeah. Did you enjoy living in London?
Yeah, I did enjoy. Yeah, it was great. I mean, I traveled a lot, and had a super fun time, and it was a really great balance. I think particularly your fellow compatriots over there in the have a great work-life balance too. And that was
Yeah.
really, yeah.
Yeah, I think particularly in London, that was always one of the things that surprised me. I've been here, it'll be 11 years in December. And any night is a good night to go out in London. It makes no difference. You can go out on a Monday night and it's busy, there's people around, there's always a buzz, there's always a vibe.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, coming to another fair-sized city that would be the same.
Yeah.
And certainly 11 years ago, it wasn't really, it would have really surprised me.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think actually all my colleagues and friends that I made over in the UK were just lovely people and really just interested, wanting to do great work and good things. So yeah, I have nothing bad to say about my time in London. It was great.
Good. Slight sidebar there. Just wanted to, just wanted to check that you enjoyed it. So you came back, did you come back to Australia at that point, or you went back to New Zealand?
Yeah, no, so I came back to New Zealand, to Australia at that point, and where I really was, so I'd been and done a lot of, I'd done a lot of quite broad experience in all of these different areas of marketing, and really where my career was starting to go then was more leaning into the advertising space. So I wanted to really get into agencies over in Australia here, where I could jump in on the creativity, the brand strategy in a different level. Because I had been so digital content focused, it's now just, all right, let's have a look at the above the line and stitching everything together there. So that's where I came over into here. So working for the larger, some larger network agencies, as well as a small agency and a big independent as well. So we really, what I was doing is honing that craft of the comms, the customer, the stitching together of the, the best lines and the best creative in order to build that brand affinity for whichever brand I was working on at the time, but also tying that together with creativity. And so what I've loved about this time here in the agencies I've worked with is really just, gosh, the clever people in this market. You think you have to go to New York or London or whatever to work with these amazing, clever marketing minds, but they're all here and they're ready to roll, and they're all working together to create this beautiful panel of experts that I've had the pleasure of working with in each of the roles I've had here, agency side. And what it also gave me more exposure to as well as the production side. So I hadn't really done, until this point in my career, until Australia, I haven't really done big TV shoots and all of those kinds of things. So that has been really great, as well as the continued widening the industries that I've worked in as well. So jumping into tourism, I worked with the Tourism Western Australia for several years, and the AFL as a sports side, and NFPs with with Lifeblood. So it's been really brilliant to round out that experience that way, and that's when I kind of finally came to a client side opportunity. So that was brought around to me in an interesting way. So a lot of agency people actually often find this, they get to a point where they go, okay, I want to have a change, I want to go client side, and then they have to really find the right opportunities, and that's a really important thing, because sometimes, and as we'll talk about, sometimes there can be a little bit of a lack of understanding of some of the value that agency side people can bring to a client side role. But actually, I was lucky enough to find a role where they were really actively looking for an agency side person, with agency experience and those skill sets to bring into their business, and really help make things happen, as agency people kind of tend to do. We're really people that have been professionally bred to get the job done and get it done well, and actually make progress and move, and that's due to a lot of the agency structures as well as anything else. So that was great, actually, to jump into a client side role that already I didn't have to sell why my experience to make an impact or be valuable into their business, but they knew, or they had a good idea as well. So that was really handy.
Was it always the goal for you, or sort of a, I don't know, maybe a 5-year marker or 10-year marker, whatever it was, that you would ultimately see yourself making that move, or was it purely that opportunity came to you and you thought it seemed like a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, I've not had a marker of by this point I want to, but as you will have probably coming to learn from all my experience, I am a person that just wants to try new things
Mm,
and go off and understand all the different elements and different sides of what I'm doing, because I do think there's such value in bringing all the different types of experience together and being very well rounded in that way. Um,
absolutely.
so it's definitely something that I've always wanted to do. It was just a matter of the right opportunity at the right time, and that's certainly what it was. Yeah.
In terms of, and it's one of the things that I'm keen to get into is this, I'm not sure what the right word is it the kind of the cliches or the, you know, the myths about agency and client side and what some of those are. And I think certainly, like most things, there's probably a grain of truth in all of them, and then maybe they just kind of take on a life of their own, but definitely interested to kind of talk through some of those.
Mm.
And you mentioned one there which previously, which is a phrase that I think does kind of get used a lot, and is that idea that, you know, that the most creative people are in agency.
Mhm.
And as you had a, you know, super positive example of working with some really creative people and realizing that, you know, they're here in Australia, you don't need to kind of go off around the world, there's amazingly clever creative people here. Do you think that that particular myth, cliche, whatever we're going to call it, in your experience, does it hold weight? Do you think that those super creative people do tend to stay in agency rather than sort of find their way over to client side?
I think it can depend, because when you have, we talk about these clever and creative people, they're not necessarily just the creative, the person sitting in the room staring
Mm,
at the ceiling, coming up with magical
yeah,
lines that end up as TV ads or whatever. There are also the people that are, super clever and creative, but in the data side and in the strategic sides. And I think it- agencies can tend to keep people like that because of the breadth of work and the different
yeah,
types of, and all the different you can be working on 5 or 6 amazing brands at once rather than
mm,
into one, and having and often actually what it is around agency side is the pace of the work. So
yeah,
depending on the client, you might be putting out 2 or 3 campaigns a year, and within an in-house role, but you might, or some do a lot more than that, but
yeah,
for a senior creative wanting to do really big beautiful TV work, generally some brands only refresh every few years to
yeah,
have a large weighty chunk of that. So I think that's one of the reasons why particularly creatives can stay agency side a lot longer than in other
yeah,
roles. And the thing is, um, lots of in-house, yeah, they just can't support having a big enough creative offering. So
yeah, yeah.
um, so I think that's probably one of the reasons why. But I certainly think there are some really incredibly clever people on both sides of the fence.
Mm,
And going back to what transferring into client side, to me, it's about the experience across all of the boards, and you don't have to stay client side and go
yeah.
agency side. So you can actually kind
Go
of,
the other way too. Yeah.
you can have a career that jumps about, because you might really want to have this deep relationship with one brand for a while as a creative person, as a strategist, whatever it might be. You might want to delve really deeply down into that for however long feels good, and then
Yeah.
come back out and sort of see, have a little bit of that different environment and really understand where you want to go again for your next role. Could be a way to go as well. So I feel like,
Yeah.
one of the preconceptions maybe that I
Yeah.
need to
Maybe
try
that's the way to say
us
it.
in conversation, is that either an agency person or a client side person,
Mm,
an in-house person, and I think you can really be both.
yeah. And that the direction is agency client side, not client
Yeah,
side agency.
and there's
Um,
a lot of value in client side people coming into agency, because
yeah.
you have such an insight into the in-house world, and that's something that through my experience and my latest role, which has been an in-house role, really, gosh, that depth of experience of what the marketers are thinking about and
Yeah.
what they're involved in as well, as a as a marketing professional and my latest role, really getting into all different sides of the business and having pressures and challenges and, in good ways, pressures and
Yeah.
challenges in really good ways of going, okay, well, how do we think about this and where can we unlock revenue? How can we find different ways to launch this product that's not just a multi-million-dollar
Yeah.
TV buy? All of the different, the incredible data that's available to you about all of your customers and
Yeah.
all of these different things that they're thinking about that is not actually to do with the campaign that you're
Yeah.
working on as an agency side
Yeah.
person.
And probably
Yeah.
some of that broader business exposure of what some of the other day-to-day challenges are. And obviously as a marketer, that is your primary focus, but the wider business is by its nature probably going to pull you in a few different directions as well. People have obviously got their own priorities, depending on what your reporting structure is. You might be a part of, and often it seems much more often nowadays that senior marketers are part of a senior leadership team, which is great. But then there's still those competing priorities of, I don't know, whether it's cost or how are you working with sales or whatever it might be. And still, I think, and actually a conversation I was having yesterday, still a lot of businesses that don't really understand marketing and marketers in their businesses needing to educate the business that they're part of as to what their role actually is, what they can and can't do, what they can and can't influence, and how ultimately they work. Is probably, I would imagine, quite different to the agency experience.
That is true, although maybe not as different as it's not night and day, because often one of your roles in agency is to do that job on behalf of whoever your marketing partner within the business is. And throughout my years, I've had to do a lot of assisting those roles to sell in through the business as well. So you're totally right in that there's a lot of internal education that needs to happen in some businesses, and some businesses just get it. And so and also the role of marketing can be so broad, as we've talked about and as you just explained, that you really do, particularly when it's a leadership team role, you get really into the nitty-gritty of everything, the commercials right across the board. I was worked closely with ops where I am at the moment, so it's really been the commercial side of that and how that carries over into marketing has been a really great lesson for me as well, and something I'll keep bringing into my next roles too.
Yeah. One of the let's go with your phrase. It was better than mine. Preconceived notions, preconceived ideas. You said it better. I think I was being a bit clickbaity. The myths. I don't know what I was what I was trying to do there. One of the ones that over the years I've had lots of conversations with candidates in both camps and wanting to kind of move between the two, and the kind of work-life balance conversation is one that comes up often, and I think that the preconceived notion certainly was that your work-life balance in agency isn't great, and that the hours can be long, and there's a lot of pressure, but kind of all the time. It's not just in sort of bursts. How was your experience of that?
Agency side? Yeah, so I've had a bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it can be a preconceived notion. It can be a myth, but it also really just depends on the agency you're working with and the leadership team and what the values are of the agency. And all too often you sort of need to get in there and give it a go to try.
Yeah.
But what I've found as well is, it's like anything in life. You have to have your boundaries and you have to assert those. So, you know what is, fair for you and what you're willing to do. And plenty of people are really happy to put in a lot of extra long hours and work around the clock. But it's also up to you to be as efficient as you can and also raise your hand when you're drowning. And what I've found the most in my career has been actually more it's not that I'm working long hours. I'm okay with that as a person. But if you're too stretched and you're not getting to do anything well enough, or to the point that you're really delivering the best value to your clients, in this instance, as we're talking about agency side, then that's where it starts to become a problem for me. But I've always worked in businesses where, if I do raise raise the flag and say, hang on, I can't do all of this as well as we need to, and balls might drop. That's a real risk for an agency. So it's all about the relationship that you have with the agency and with the leaders, I think, and I hope that things can change. And I've also been quite picky of where I've gone to work, and stayed away from those which had a very obvious reputation for really burning out their teams. So I suppose what I would say to people is just do your research and try to talk to people in there, because they're certainly out there, agencies that really demand a lot of you in terms of your time and your energy. But like any business, if it's run well, they'll understand that a work-life balance is going to be the best for the people who work for longevity. And as you get to a leadership team level, as I am at my career, I'm a big proponent for making sure we look after our people, because that's the best way you look after the bottom line.
Yeah. And then I guess the flip side, or the reverse of that preconceived notion that that the client side has better work-life balance and the hours aren't as long, and all of that reverse side. What was your experience of that?
The client side role I was in was a global and leadership role. So we had
So no.
a lot of my time, particularly through COVID, on evening calls.
Yeah.
But that being said, there is always a lot of support for taking that time back when you can. So I have experienced that, and it is actually one of the preconceived notions that I have had, or that I've discussed with agency colleagues in the past, is that you get to a point where you're ready to just take it a bit easy, and moving client side is a bit of an easier option. And people and really agency born and bred people will say, oh yeah, okay, now you just want to go and your feet up.
Life. Yeah.
Cushy life of being client side. And that I haven't found that to be true. I found it to not for long hours, but it's challenging work. It's hard. You're all trying to work towards it, and ultimately it lands on your shoulders when you're leading team. It does land on you. So it's not a cushy life in my experience. But there's certainly that preconceived notion. I can understand it.
Yeah. And I think it's what you said there, isn't it? That there are still challenges, there are still pressures, but they're slightly different. And so they might present slightly differently to the outside world.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, the one side of it that I did find interesting going into client side was the deadlines are not the same. So there's just a lot more, what's the right word? Comfort around a flexible deadline. Rather than agency side, you're very much driven by, we said we would get it today and we have to get it today, because otherwise our SLAs aren't maintained, our clients will not be happy with us. We've said what we've said. So that is one of the things actually that took me a bit of getting used to. Oh, we said we would be live with this campaign in 2 days, and there's no one else worried about that. So it did take me a minute to get used to. But that's not to say that there was less commitment or anything like that. It's just a slightly different a different level of flexibility.
Yeah, and I think it's, as you said, it's kind of the realities around that, isn't it? That's obviously built into your service level agreement with your customer as the agency, whereas when you're client side, you are the customer. So if it's ultimately going to lead to better work or a better output, and it's a day or 2 days late, you're probably going to be a day or 2 days late for a better outcome, because you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you're lining it up to line up with a PR opportunity that we've just had, or whatever that might be. So that's probably the one biggest difference that I noticed, to be honest.
Yeah. I am just thinking about something you said earlier, and I really, really liked it, that idea of going the other way, but also it not just being one way and then you're there and you're never kind of coming back. And I do wonder whether that's something that, you know, pandemic and lockdown has kind of given the market in its broadest sense more flexible thinking around not being so quick to put people in a box and say that's your box and you will stay there. I really feel that has been a shift over the last couple of years, and personally, thank God it has, because I think the very kind of rigid approach that in some instances was there before, personally, I didn't feel was particularly helpful. Have you seen that? Do you think that has shifted over the past couple of years or so?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
And one of the things I completely agree with you. We focus so much as businesses around diversity, which is absolutely the right thing. Diversity of gender, diversity of cultural background, you know, all sorts of different diversity. But one of the really important things as well is diversity of thinking and diversity of thought patterns and the different backgrounds that people have from a professional perspective that can bring really new and interesting ways of doing things into businesses, particularly in-house businesses where maybe you've been doing the same thing for a long time and it's not working anymore because you have to change things up, and so bringing somebody in that has a different type of skill set might be really beneficial. And people from agency side, I think, one of the things, every agency has its different strategic model, different way of thinking things through, and different CRM models and all these sorts of things. So you are trained to think differently in each different role, and that can be really useful bringing to client side as well. So alongside all of the different types of diversity, which is getting, and very rightly, a real focus at the moment, and hopefully even stronger, to include diversity of thought, which comes through from hiring women into senior roles, people of diverse cultural backgrounds. We all bring something different to the table.
I think that's a really, really good point, and I think the way that people think about diversity, ironically, it's not particularly diverse. They go to those markers of gender or cultural background, and as you say, it's not that broader understanding necessarily of, yeah, but what does that ultimately mean? It means that people probably think a little bit differently because they've been exposed to different things, perhaps if they've got work experience from another country, and the same, I think, can be said for work experience from perhaps a different industry. All these different kind of diverse ways of thinking, of working, and anyone who has listened to this podcast before knows that this is one of my soapbox topics, and I'm dangerously close to getting in there again. But I do think there's so much that the market can benefit from, just looking at things in different ways and having different perspectives. And the example that you gave there of, if someone's been in client side in a particular industry for quite a while, they're used to doing things a certain way. They've probably in some instances even forgotten why they do it that way. And someone new kind of coming in and going, why are we doing it this way? Like, what's the basis? What's the, what are our customers telling us about this? Whatever it might be, what does the data say? I think it's really, really valuable. And still there is a little bit of pushback on that, I think, even though I definitely think it's getting better. But it's still there. I will now dismount from my soapbox.
And just to get on the tail end of your soapbox, and that's what happens when businesses approach diversity in a way that's more than just a box ticking exercise. And as every different type of diverse background, no matter whether it's different types of families, as I say, cultures, orientations, all these things, they all bring a different perspective. So let's think a bit more widely about it. I agree.
What What advice would you give to someone who is perhaps in a client-side role? They've been in a client-side role their whole career. What advice would you give to them, perhaps about how they engage with their agency partners, or perhaps how they can really get the best from their client service team? Are there particular things that you think actually both sides could do better to make the relationship better?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a true agency person in here with my answer, but really looking at each other as a real partnership. So
Mm,
sometimes, and sometimes an agency relationship is transactional because you have a project, you just need them to do whatever the job is. But the best way to get, the best way to get the most value out of your agency is really to look at them as partners. And I think that's really where your client service person comes
mm,
in. This, as I've, I've always called it in my life. So because they're really the glue person that brings it all together. And I
yeah,
think working with somebody and really having proper, I mean, the other thing as well is having upstream involvement to have downstream benefit as
yeah,
well as another side of that. And that's what being a partner means, because if you can really understand, you bring them along with what you're trying to achieve long term, have a really clear brief, have the right objectives, which agencies can help you hone and get better at, and really get to a great spot with a brief. That is, those are some of the building blocks of it, of working together, whether you've been in-house for a long time or you're from the agency side and you're trying to bridge that gap and working together. It's really just all about having that, you know, having that real partnership of
yeah,
understanding each side of it. And then from a client perspective, great work takes a bit of time and space. So
mm,
having the respect for that as well. And again, from an agency side over to client side, having a real respect and understanding for the pressures that the client side team are facing, and what they need to overcome in order to help get this through.
yeah. I think to me that's probably where, and in either direction, that's
Mm.
probably where the real benefit of that diverse experience comes, because you understand what the person on the other side, wrong term, I can't think of what
Yeah.
the person on the other side is actually going through, and what their challenges are, what their objectives are, and what they're kind of battling against in order to get their part of the job done. If you know that and you understand that, then you're going to be much more sympathetic to some of the perhaps obstacles that come up. But you would think as well that you're working more in sync, because you sort of know, oh, if I present the information this way, that's going to make it far easier for them. We're immediately going to be on the same page, and it's going to be much more efficient, as a very high level example. Do you think that's true?
Oh, I 100% think that's
Mm,
true. Really understanding what the drivers are at their end, and so much of what, all the training sessions that I've ever had in my agency years has always been about to ask why, and
yeah,
ask why again and again and again, until you really understand what the real drivers are. What are the strategic levers that this business is trying to pull by briefing in this work? And there might be a real misalignment there, or what are they really trying to achieve? Actually, what we think we're trying to do is not really
yeah,
solving the business problem at all. So really understanding that next layer down, and try not to see it as a superficial, um, you know, here's what I need, go away and do it, but
yeah,
really, investigating that it's worth it.
yeah,
Because, and that's one of the, I feel like from a client perspective as well, sometimes from an in-house team perspective, sometimes there is a bit of a preconception, or a myth. Maybe this is one of your myths, is that agencies are
we got one.
just there for the billable hours. And like, yes, they
Yeah,
are. That's their business model.
yeah,
So they do need to bill their hours out, and there's value in that. But it's not just about sell, 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 and I'm just going to do that. If you're with a good agency and you have a good client service partner, then you will. It's all about the value,
yeah.
and that's,
And,
one of the interesting things that. Sorry.
no, go ahead, sorry.
One of the interesting things actually, that I've quite recently come to acknowledge, and my brain particularly in my most recent role, is that with the flip side of that billable hours mentality, when you come up through agency, is a real understanding of the value of activity and what works and what's worth it,
Yeah.
which can sometimes be sometimes in in-house roles. In my experience and what people have shared with me in the past is that something small unravels and becomes a really big thing, and actually it's not going to have that big of an impact, and all of a sudden you need to get 15 different people in-house to weigh in and be a part of a project, and is that going to, whereas if you're in-house, and some in-house businesses actually do this, they put a value to the hours and they cost it up. And I've done that a couple of times in my in-house role, to just really go, okay, well, this is going to be X number of $1,000 just to do this email. And if we think this email is going to deliver an ROI, then great. But if we think it's going to deliver an ROI of 2, then is it really worth the time? Because we've got this other project that is going to deliver an ROI of 8. So it's that side of things, which is an interesting thing that is valuable to an agency person going in-house, some of that mentality.
Yeah, and just a good way of even just setting priorities and kind of working out, because obviously you're going to, again, be pulled in different directions. How do you actually work out which is maybe not even the most important, but maybe there's something that can have a really large impact for a smaller amount of time, and maybe you're new in the role, and that sort of low-hanging fruit is a really good place to start.
And that's it. It's an example of the diversity of thought.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So somebody from a different background, where you think, you might think that's a negative, that they're just worried about the cost of their hours, but actually it can bring a positive to your business.
Yeah. And also, I was just thinking, as you were talking about that sort of relationship in the billable hours piece, it's ultimately comes down to trust as well, doesn't it? And if there's not that feeling of trust, if you're sort of looking at your agency partner thinking, I don't reckon there's 100 hours work in this, or whatever it is, I think they're trying it on, is there really going to be a good outcome and good value from that relationship if that's the way that it's being viewed? And I think that that's the same in lots of service industries. I don't think that's something that's necessarily specific in our example. I think it happens in recruitment. I think it happens in the big consulting firms, in the law, like all of these different service-based industries. But I guess it comes back to that, if there's that transparent communication and there's trust, and both people working towards the shared goal.
Yeah.
Do you think from a recruitment perspective, or just in terms of people wanting to maybe make that move, I was going to say agency to client side, but it can be client side to agency. We've established that it goes both ways. Do you and obviously in your example, you were approached and they actively wanted someone from agency, which, as you said, made that whole conversation so much easier. Do you think there's still a little bit of a lack of understanding perhaps about what skills that, let's say, account director or client service person brings? Do you think sometimes there needs to be a little bit of translation perhaps around what those job titles are, or what skills that person brings?
Yeah, I think there is. And what I would say to anybody thinking to make that switch is, don't underestimate your transferable skills, because there is a lot of value in all the things that we've talked about today. So that's really important. And I think the translation, there is a real learning curve, though. We can't not acknowledge that when you jump either way, because in-house structures and processes are very different to agency structures and processes. As I said, there is a transferable, I completely believe in the transferability from both ways. And they bring different values to the party on each side. But you do need to really understand, and perhaps something like an internal mentor or some coaching can help you bridge the gap. But it's a learning curve that is probably not that much different to transferring into a different industry, or transferring into a different category, or even sometimes a promotion or an internal move. So while there is there is definitely learning to happen. I don't believe it's too much more onerous than probably many other different moves. You know, you're
Yeah.
usually it takes you 2 or 3 months to really get your teeth into a new
Yeah.
role. And by that time, if you transferred from agency into client side, you come to understand their businesses. But it's all about each business on either side of the equation that we're talking about today, actually bringing people on with the right levels of support and the right
Mm.
on practices and the right management. Really, it just all comes down
Yeah.
to that opinion. I really have a belief in the potential of people, and that we can all, you know, if you're a clever, hardworking, determined person, you will come to grips with whatever. You know, generally you're not going into a new job out of
Yeah.
desperation. You're
Yeah.
doing it because you want to make that move. So I
Yeah.
have I have faith in anybody wanting to make that jump.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear, and I 100% agree. And I think it's something that I find myself saying quite often, the exact same thing, that if you're going to a new job, it's new anyway. Just because it's maybe the same industry, and you know, maybe it's you've gone from one marketing manager role to another, it's still new. You're still going to have to learn. Structures aren't the same everywhere. You know, departments are structured differently. They have different support. They have all sorts of differences. Obviously, different people. You'll have to start to build relationships again. And I really, don't see how a few extra differences really make that much difference. Assuming, as you said, you've got someone who wants to learn, is willing to learn, is hardworking, is capable, is intelligent, all of those things, and comes with a bank of transferable skills. So yes, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
It's an equation that I believe the benefits outweigh the challenges, you know.
Yeah. Do you think, I suspect I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Would you if you're hiring for your in-house team, would you actively seek out people with an agency background?
Yeah, I would. And but obviously it all depends on the role and the
Yeah.
expertise you're
Yeah.
looking for. Yeah, I think, but that's also probably a bit of I'm not sure what the right term is. It's not it's not nepotism, but something similar where well, I managed to do it and this has
Yeah.
been
Bit
valuable.
of,
So
is it experience bias? I don't know,
yeah,
something like that.
something. So yeah, no, I do think as long as it's somebody who's really willing to make that jump and can understand and bring people along with the right, you know, having an open conversation about what the
Yeah.
differences are and what those challenges what might be. And you know, typically in job interviews, you always talk about, well, what do you think the challenges of this
Yeah.
role are going to be? And if an agency person is sitting there not saying, oh well, I have not worked in client side before, then
Yeah.
that's a bit of a
That's a bit
red
of a
flag.
concern.
Don't really understand the differences. But yeah, I think I'd keep it open for sure.
Yeah.
And the same, you know, to be honest, I haven't really done much agency hiring of people without agency experience. But so that would be interesting. You know, you don't. I don't know that I've actually maybe ever been in a situation where I've had a candidate come through that's been entirely in-house experience and no agency experience. But again, I think I'd be quite open to that as well.
Yeah, and it goes back to that point, doesn't it, about diversity
Oh, I think
and kind of
oh, oh,
viewing it. Can you hear me okay?
yes, I can hear you now.
Sorry, there's a helicopter landing on the Crown Crown helicopter pad there. I was trying to mute it out in the background. But yeah, it goes back to that diversity point, doesn't it? About if you're viewing diversity in its broadest possible meaning, that you would want a variety of experiences kind of coming into your team.
Absolutely. And so much is aptitude and attitude, isn't
Yeah,
it?
totally. Yeah, I think so important. In terms of some of those preconceived ideas, were there any other ones that you had going into your client side role, and if so, what was your experience of them in reality?
Um, I don't think there's really I think I had a healthy understanding of that it would be a bit different. I think I don't think I had massive preconceived notions because of the conversations that I had had with the team that I'd be working with, and
Yeah.
what they really wanted from me. So apart from needing to understand how the business was structured, and really what my role in it was going to be, I didn't really have any massive myths that were disproven or proven.
Yeah. That's
Way,
good, I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And partly that is perhaps just a testament to being open-minded and not wanting to kind of have those kind of fixed box ideas one way or the other.
Yeah. I
And
guess probably the one thing would be, we always spoke about, we've always been told through agency experience that you're only 5% of your client's life. And probably that was the biggest thing um, that really rang true as soon as I was into an in-house role, because it's so true. And actually working with the agencies, I thought, oh, it'd be great to, this will be, I'll work super closely, like
yeah.
they'll take my time, we'll be sitting there giving, spending hours.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't. And it actually gave me a different lens on agencies, presentations, and processes.
Yeah.
Don't make it so difficult. Don't make
Mm.
it so cumbersome. Clean, simple, efficient. That's what we really want from you, with great results, obviously, which is a lot to ask for
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably that's the thing really true, was just from a creative agency point of view into an in-house
Mm.
role. Yeah, they really are dealing with a huge amount of other, things that take their brain space. It's not just
Yeah.
all about the beautiful
It,
creative life.
it's a really interesting thing, yeah, to think about, isn't it? And I assume they tell you that to kind of give you a sense of everything else that someone has going on, and just because it's the most important thing to you at that moment in time, it's actually only 5% of what's going on with them. That's a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
absolutely.
I think we can apply that to lots of things in life, actually.
And also, I think from an agency point of view, it is about just package it up nicely,
Yeah.
tell a cohesive story, make it simple, don't blab on, but make this the best 5% of their day.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a billable hour side of things. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's why they were always given croissants and muffins and
My final question, Steph, it's always the final question here on the podcast. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
I think this ties so super well into lots of the things that we've discussed today. But I wish it's not so much what I know now, but what I wish I had really had was cognizant of, was it's always fine to learn and do something for the first time. And I think we can often, when I was at the start of my career, I kind of always thought, oh, am I allowed to do this? I have not done this before. But really, the idea of learning and growing and just trying new things, is something that I wish I had a little bit more comfort with at the start, and I'm certainly really comfortable with now. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing for me, and it comes to play in that, I do jump around from clients to agencies to different types of roles, different industries, always putting your best foot forward and bringing what you can to the table. So that's probably for me the biggest
Yeah.
one.
And I think ultimately what that gives you is obviously a breadth of experience, but it's kind of more than that. It's the breadth of the experience, but it's also the knowledge that you can, because you have, you've tried something new, you found a way of making it work. And maybe in some cases it didn't work, and that was okay too, because you found a way to kind of move on from that. So I think
Absolutely.
it's that kind of reflection of, you can.
Yeah. And being okay with not knowing something, I think there's a real, and particularly when you get more into leadership roles, I think that there's a perception from more junior team members that you just know everything.
Yeah.
Don't, and nobody does. And particularly in a field like marketing where everything's changing,
Yeah.
and we've seen you know, the lives of the social platforms all changing, and now we need to rework how we're using social, what that is in our strategies, what role it's playing for our businesses, what it's delivering to us. So, you know, we're always having to learn and change and grow, and we just don't know everything, and you never will get to a point where you know everything. So just learn it.
Yeah, and if you think you do, then that's a problem in itself.
Yes, that is a problem. Some people probably do think they know it all, but yeah, absolutely. Just keep on learning and upskilling, and and that is all within our own power and our own remit. And people won't drag us through. And that's something, actually, I sat in a meeting the other day with somebody giving advice to a junior staff member, which was, you know, your progression is in your hands as well. So when you're junior, you're not just going to get dragged up by your elbow by a manager who thinks you could be great. You know, it's all in your hands, and you can really do it yourself. And you need to.
I do think that's true. There's sometimes that perception that the organisation kind of owes you that's the, you know, they should help me, they owe me to help me with my career, but no one's going to care about your career as much as you do. So you're the one that needs to take ownership for that and drive it. And I think that's it. And obviously people will help you and support you, sure, and the organisation should do that, but you need to be the driver.
Yeah, you need to stake your claim in the ground and go, this is what I'm doing. Here's what I would like to do, and here's what I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Steph. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and share your experience and your thoughts. It's been really interesting. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma, for your time and for having me. It's been really fun.
Very welcome.